one of the reasons I wrote the book of forgiveness is because nobody knows how to do it. But some people have tapped into it without knowing it. And you have tapped into the principles because you've made peace with your past. And that past was horrible, and it was violent, and it was dark, and it was black, and you made peace with it. And most people can't do that. Even with the PTSD, most people can't do it.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people watching us from around the world, they say, yeah, we know where Canada is. And Canada is they won the hockey game just today, right? Right, we beat the U.S. Yes! So, you're not a hockey fan, are you?
My husband is. He was not really very happy about it.
Oh. So
he was watching the game.
Oh, and that's a good thing. So so talking about British Columbia, then it's on the west coast, right? Yes, it is British Columbia, and then we have this big city in British Columbia called Vancouver. We are 500 miles north of Vancouver, or for our European friends, 800 kilometers. And so that city is called Prince George. It is nature's paradise. We have lots of lakes, lots of forest, and lots of friends in nature. We have black bears, grizzly bears, we have mooses, we have caribou, we have deer, you name it, we have it all here. So today a very, very special podcast with the lady's name is Katharine Giovanni. And Katharine is a 3 times award-winning best-selling author. She is also a presenter or speaker and one of the original founders of the independent concierge industry. I'm sure we're going to talk about that. Katharine has authored over 12 books, including her latest release, The Ultimate Path to Forgiveness, Unlocking Your Power. Katharine's journey is one of remarkable resilience, and we'll be talking about all of that. Katharine, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So tell us about your background. It sounds like, although I don't think that is the case, that you were born in Italy, but you already mentioned it's by choice. So tell us all about it. Where were you from, and then where are you now? And then, so that how did this all start? And obviously you are very active in a number of areas. Entrepreneurship is one of them, and obviously a very well-established author. So how did you start? Where were you born, your education, your background, and how did you get to the point of being a very established author and then obviously subsequently a podcaster?
Well, I was born in New York City, lived there for 30 years, and I've now lived in North Carolina for about 31 years, so I'm probably a half-breed at this point. And the reason I call myself a transformation and forgiveness coach is that probably implies that the universe has gifted me with a lot of things I needed to forgive over the course of my life. So I've had a lot of the opposite. And it all probably started when I was in the 8th grade, and I was terribly bullied because I'm different. I'm very intuitive, so people don't like different, so they bully you. And my parents were really pickled, which means they were raging alcoholics. So I tried to commit suicide, and I turned into one of those kids. You know, the kids I'm talking about, right?
Right.
And I just kind of drifted through life until my mother fell down a flight of stairs, broke her hip, and ended up in the hospital. And even my mother couldn't get a gin and tonic in the hospital. So she dried out and we sent her to rehab. And Mom and I spent the next 3 years closer than sisters, tighter than tight. We forgave each other. We did everything together. We practically finished each other's sentences. And then she died of breast cancer, which I actually later survived in 2012. But everybody's life has what I call flashpoints. You don't know it's a flashpoint when you're going through it. And I've read about you. You had more than one flashpoint, my friend. Several big ones. But my flashpoint was when she died, and I knew without the shadow of a doubt that if I didn't clean my act up, I was going to die too. I always kind of thought I was meant for bigger things anyways, because I was different. So I quit drinking. It was the only New Year's resolution I actually ever kept. And I've been sober now for 35 years. And when you go into those rooms, as they call it, you have to do what they call a fourth step. I believe it's a fourth step. And you have to reach out and make amends. Okay, your girl was painfully shy. I'm an extroverted introvert now, but I wasn't back then. And we didn't have computers and texting. I would have loved to text people my amends. We didn't have it. All you could do was either talk to them in person or call them up on the phone. Those were the choices. I didn't
Yeah.
want people to yell at me, so I didn't do it.
Yeah.
And but I didn't reach out to them. So I just did it quietly in my apartment and, said I was sorry. And I'd kind of imagine the person and I would kind of went along like that. And there was no real energy behind it. But then my life started to change. And about a year later, I met my husband of 33 years. And a few years after that, we started a business. And a few years after that, I'm one of the founders of the independent concierge industry. And back in those years, in the never mind what year it was, you didn't bring soft topics to business sessions. You just didn't. And I can't teach you 5-star customer service, and I can't teach you how to be a concierge if you're angry, because your anger is going to bleed through your body language whether you want it to or not. And if you're not George Clooney, who's a master actor, you can't stop it. So I had to come up with a way to get people to release their anger when they couldn't leave their desk. And that's when I started to teach forgiveness. Now, the thing about forgiveness is everybody tells you to forgive. Your parents, your pastors, your teachers. Nobody teaches you how. And then what if you don't want to? What if it's unforgivable? Then what do you do? So I've created a system in my latest book that teaches people step by step by step on exactly how to forgive people.
Very, very interesting, obviously, and as you already indicated, we have things in common, trauma of different sorts and different. Just a little bit about me that you likely already know. I was born in 1940, so I'm 84 years young, and and I've had an interesting life because we all know I was born in northeastern Holland, so within 10-15 minutes from the German border, just at the time that things become very, very delicate. And Hitler had decided that he wanted to take over Poland because they belonged to Germany, in his opinion, and that started the Second World War. And ultimately killed 60 million people. But just before that, my parents were married in 1938. They were in love. My dad was working in a lumber organization, a little lumber mill, and they had rented a beautiful house, and very quickly they had 2 children, a boy and a girl. And then early 1940, my mom was pregnant with me. I would be born November the 1st, 1940. And then what happened is Hitler decided he should take over Western Europe. And so it's the Blitzkrieg that happened in May of 1940. My dad was drafted into the Dutch army, and the last time that they saw him or heard from him, the last time that somebody saw him was downtown Rotterdam just before they bombed it, because Hitler found that they didn't surrender quick enough for his likes, so he wanted to make an example of Rotterdam and bomb it in the center of Rotterdam. That killed thousands of people. And so that then became my mom for 5 years. We would not know if he survived or died in Rotterdam. And so Then the first thing that I remember as 3.5 years old, was the Allied forces, as we all know, had the Americans and Canadians landed on Normandy, and other Allied forces, as well as the UK and on and on and on, landed in Normandy, and the Canadians pushed through France, through Belgium, and then through Western Holland, and pushed the German forces out through the top where we lived, across the German border. And at the same time, already in mid-43, the Allied forces started bombing the German army infrastructure, and a lot of that was located close to where we were, close to the North Sea, the northeastern part of Germany that touches on the North Sea. We were 10-15 minutes away from the border, and I remember then hundreds of bombers overhead, and the sound of that you will never hear again and never forget once you hear it. So she would
What a horrible thing for a child.
She would take us out on a flat roof behind our house, and then the reason that she did is not to look at the planes, but she felt safer outside than inside. And in the distance, we would see the sky being red, where they bombed the cities, Wilhelmshaven, Hamburg, Kiel, and all of those cities that had that infrastructure, Emden. And, so that was quite an experience. The next experience that I remember as a child was 1944. The Germans had decided no more food would flow into Holland, in that region, to cut off everything. And then the three of us, the kids, would every morning go with gunny sacks into the railroads to pick up anything edible and burnable, because there was no food. A lot of kids died. A lot of senior people that were vulnerable died. And so that's what we did. And the reason that we did as kids is because they wouldn't shoot us. They boot us one, but we'd be back the following day. And in the evenings, we would be sitting around a little stove. Now, the winter in northeastern Holland, was the coldest one on record. And so, and we had this little small room with a little heater, and we'd be sitting around there just to stay warm. But I can still feel all of that even now, 80 years later.
Oh, but you can. The energy is still around you. Yeah.
And so from there on in, the next thing that I remember is that, on April the 12th, 1945, we were liberated by the Canadian Army. And it made such an impression on me that I always knew from that point forward, once I grew up, I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And I did that when I was 23. But when they pushed the Germans out of northeastern Holland, we saw far too much that we should not have seen. Dead bodies. It got pretty rough there where we were, and they blew up the bridges behind them to slow down the Allied forces or the Canadians, and we saw too many things, too many people being shot, standing there as little kids, and seeing people being packed on little wagons and carried away with legs and arms sticking out.
Oh.
So, not good,
No,
so,
not even little.
And so that's kind of part of my background, and and then obviously from there and then I left for Canada when I was 24. So.
That's a lot of stuff before 24.
Yeah.
You lived 3 lifetimes by the time you were 24. And my uncle died in World War II in the Battle of Normandy. He made it off the boat. He made it over that beach. Not sure how he did it. And he made it into the French countryside and got hit by a sniper.
Yeah. And a lot of.
I tend to cry through those movies because I can't even imagine.
Exactly. And a lot of lives were lost. The other part that had an effect on my life was I still am affected by PTSD and the inner child, actually, as a result from, and I always will be. And the other part, I was not very successful academically. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. And so then when the third time that I failed grade 7, they said to my parents, what are we going to do now? So some people suggested send him to the mentally challenged school. They said, no, we're not going to do that. So we'll find him, we'll get him a profession or a career of some sort. So they said, let's make him a furniture maker. So that I like that because my grandfather was a master carpenter, my dad was in lumber, and I like that. So at 12 and a half years old, I went to a furniture factory and became, at nights, go to school and became a furniture maker.
Yeah, but you had a PhD in life. I think that's more important.
Exactly. And I like that.
I think that's more important than anything else. You might have flunked third grade, but you had a PhD in life.
And so then what happened, Katharine, you can relate to this obviously because it's your specialty, is that I didn't feel good about myself really, that a lot of times, inward I did, but externally I didn't. And I was always different and I didn't know exactly why was I different. And then kids can be hard on each other. After you fail grade 7,
really hard.
Yeah, after you fail grade 7 3 times, then and I became a laborer. They went on to college and university. So I always felt I had to start over again and prove to myself that I was just as good as the others, not better than, but just as good. So when I left for Canada, in July of 1965, I wanted to start with nothing. I could not speak the language. I didn't have a job. I didn't have knew anybody. And I was going to go to the west coast of Canada and I was going to build a sawmill. That's what was my dream. And I had a bookcase. Oh, sorry, I had a bag. I had 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and very little money. And as I went on the plane across landed in Montreal, and then took the train across Montreal to Vancouver, 3 days, 4 nights. Can you believe it? That's a long way to go. And I went to the immigration office. I couldn't speak English. Fortunately, I was a German fella, and I could speak some German. And I told him I wanted to build a lumber mill. He said, go to Prince George. That's where I am now.
Right.
I can still see the Greyhound station from here, where it used to be. And I had my case and my 3 books. I had 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money at least 3 times. I had exactly $25.47. But what I did have is positive attitude. I avoid negative. I'm always, even still now, believe that if it is tough day tomorrow, tomorrow will be a better one. Passion. Whatever I do, I give it 125%. Work ethic. I work harder than anybody, even at 84. I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always make my bed, and I always think I'm late. And I did build my mill, and it's not about that. And I built a number of other companies.
Good for you. So that's a wonderful story.
But one thing changed my life, and I just want to share that with you, is because that's an important part for knowing me. And after I had been here for 32 years, already had a number of companies, and everybody said, oh, you're so successful, and blah, 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 blah. I went into a bookstore, and I picked up a book. I have the actual book right here. And the book title was Driven to Distraction, written by Dr. Hollywell. I don't know why I picked it up. And so as I was there looking at the book, it was about ADHD.
Yeah.
And I said, oh my God, that's me. And so I wrote in the book, January 1997, that now I finally know who I am. And it is ADHD that changed my life. And the more I started reading about it, and the more I checked on, the Google and read other books about it, the more I believe it's a superpower. And
it is.
And so
one of my sons has it. It in many ways it is absolutely a superpower.
So I then, at later in life, and so that was 1997, so 5 years after that, that was when I was 57. So
Right?
5 years after that, I went to my doc that had delivered our two daughters, was a personal friend, and he said, "Hey, John, why are you here?" I said, "I think I got ADHD." And so we checked it out. Yes, I do. So that was when I was 62. So can you imagine, you can, obviously, but for people watching, that I left school, grade 7, after failing 3 times. I was 12 and a half years old. And then it took me till I was 62, so for 50 years, I did not know anything about ADHD. But that's me. And that's what had been me always from the time I was born, and then started changing my life. So I became, you're an author. You've written many, many books. I'm working on,
Have
the first one that I wrote is this one, Against All Odds.
great
It's not,
title.
it's not about how good John is doing, just the opposite, all the other ones. The other one I quickly want to show you is that I wrote a book about ADHD Unlocked, very popular actually, and then another one, the last one that I wrote, actually there's one more on communications, but the last one that we printed, the other one on communications is coming out in June. But this one is Living Young, Dying Old. It's a picture of me actually. I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America.
I love that. I say to people all the time, don't die until you're dead. Just saying.
So there you have my story, and so uh, it's all about the probably the critical part for me is that to find who am I, and that took me a long time before I realized it. It probably took me well into
Journey.
my 60s.
Yeah, it's a journey.
Yes.
And it's not for the faint of heart either. It's a journey when you really want to find out who your authentic self is. And society has been trying to put you in a box for years and years and years, and you don't fit into the box. And you're trying to tell people, I don't fit into the box, I'm different. And they're trying to put you into this box.
Yeah.
And you have to have the fortitude and the mental strength to say, I'm not going in that box, and find your own way. But it can be very solitary because you don't fit in the same mold that everybody else does. So you have a very unique path.
Yes.
I
And
feel you. I did too.
yes, so the fortunate part that I had is that I had the strength and the foundation of attitude, passion, work ethic. I knew what I wanted. I wanted to build a lumber mill. And so
Yeah.
fairly quickly when I came here, I worked in a lumber mill first, piling lumber, and then clean-on man, and then supervisor. And within 3 years or 4 years, I already had an option to part ownership of a little mill. And that was my dream. And then 10 years later, I started a company, Brink Forest Products Ltd., that is one of 10 other companies that I have. And and that has been in business now for the last 50 years. But I've always remained to be independent. I have no other stakeholders, no other shareholders, and it allows me to do the things the way I want to do them. And still, the ADHD has played a very positive role in doing that, because a lot of people say to me, how do you do all the things that you're doing? You're a very active podcaster, and then you're an author, and you're a presenter, and a speaker, and then you write all these books. How do you do it all? I say
That's
ADHD,
how your
that's how
brain
I
works.
do it.
That's how your brain works. But you've
It-
got something that most people don't. You made one of the reasons I wrote the book of forgiveness is because nobody knows how to do it. But some people have tapped into it without knowing it. And you have tapped into the principles because you've made peace with your past. And that past was horrible, and it was violent, and it was dark, and it was black, and you made peace with it. And most people can't do that. even with the PTSD, most people can't do it
Right.
because they can't. It's hard. The thing about forgiveness is on a 10 scale, with 10 being unforgivable and 1 being the easiest people in the world, everybody who even sees the word thinks unforgivable. It's totally fair, except
Yeah.
for you because you're at peace with it. But most people, their knee-jerk reaction is to go right there to the darkest of the dark. So the system I created starts people with the easy ones. The person who cut you off in traffic yesterday, the easy ones, that's where it
Yeah.
is. But the several principles is just because I forgive you doesn't mean I want a relationship with you.
Right.
Probably don't. And
Right.
just because I forgive you, and this is probably the biggest critical one that you personally overcame because I've read your stuff. Um, just because I forgive you doesn't mean I'm giving you a pass, and it doesn't mean you were right.
No.
You're still wrong. You still have to make amends. Forgiveness for me and clearly for you means I want you out of my head so I can concentrate on doing what I need to do.
Exactly.
And that's the principle you tapped into because I could see it.
And then the other part about it, Catherine, is that I do not forget, but I don't know.
Nobody forgets.
It doesn't
And
allow me
nobody
to.
forgets.
And if I look back
Whoever
at,
came up with that is, I don't know who came up with forgive and forget, but it's about as wrong as anything is wrong. Nobody's going to forget.
so
Nobody.
the war years to me were changed my life, changed my family's life, changed my. That's why I say a lot of times that a lot of people respectfully think that I was there. I know what it is. I know what will happen. And a lot of people think, well, once the war is over, everything goes back to normal. No, it doesn't. It may take generations. But what I still do now, even now, for the last 12 years or so, on Remembrance Day, November the 11th, I usually that week, I always try to at least make presentations to 2 or 3 different schools throughout British Columbia, just speaking about why the 2 minutes of silence, what do they really mean, and what happens if you go through war years, and how does it affect all the things that you take for granted. And so that to me has always been very important, and I still keep doing that.
That's very good. Yeah, I mean it's a question of looking at your past and facing it head on. A lot of people call this shadow work, and it's because you're working with the shadows of your past. And by forgiving, nobody's going to forgive and forget. Just nobody's going to do that. And I think that stems from our childhood. I really do. Because the teacher will look at the kids and say, somebody just punched your eye out. Oh, well, say you're sorry. And then both of you, let's go off and play. Okay, well, he punched me. Why should I say I'm sorry? And I think we all connected some dots that should never have been connected.
Yeah.
But what I can say is once you forgive, even using my system, which is a step-by-step system, you're not going to forget, but it will remove the emotional charge. So you can look back in your past, or you could look at your ex-business partner or your family or whoever you're really mad at, and you won't care. You're not going to think good. You're not going to think bad. It's just not going to affect you. The trigger will be gone. There won't be anything to trigger you anymore.
And the other part that we have in common, Catherine, I suggest, is that once you recognize that and are able to make it work within you, then the next step is how can you help others? And so
Well, that's
that's
right.
what I do. That's what you do. I do it through my books. I do it through my podcasting. I do it through making presentations.
I've always thought that if something, I've been through cancer, I've been through money problems, I've had a lot of medical issues, blah, 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 blah. But, I've always thought that if something in my life helps even just one person, then it was worth it. I did try to commit suicide in the 8th grade, and a friend of mine did talk me out of it. She became a vascular surgeon, has saved thousands of lives. I just happened to be the very first one.
Right.
And even if you're literally at the brink, said that purposely.
Yeah.
Even if you're on the brink of creating, of creating yourself, or you're on the brink of not creating yourself and you're thinking of offering yourself, sometimes it just takes one person to pull you out. Sometimes it's
Definitely.
just one smile. I heard somewhere somebody said, you smiled at me the other day and I was thinking of committing suicide, but you saw me and I decided not to. So all the time, I tell people to be positive, go out. And my mantra, it's been for decades now, I always leave people better than I find them.
Yes.
Always.
And
There's
and
always something kind you can say because you don't know. You're in the grocery store. You have no idea what everybody's going through. My husband, this past Christmas, was in a horrible car accident and he survived, broke his back, broke his arm, and it was a horrific car accident. And he was hit from behind at 65 miles an hour.
mm,
So it wasn't his fault. And when I was in the hospital, it occurred to me, I'm very careful to smile at everybody in a hospital because it occurred to me that everybody in that hospital is there for probably a horrific reason, not just me. Everybody has a story. Everybody is upset. Even if you're going there for a doctor's appointment, you don't want it. You'd rather be on the golf course. You don't want to be there. So I'm very mindful of when I'm in public to leave people and be kind and try and leave them better than I find them because you really don't know what's behind their wall.
and then the other part about that, Catherine, is that ADHD affected me and kept me for 50 years wondering. I know I was different, but who am
Yeah,
I? And to find that, be at peace with who I am and find myself. And I believe I have an obligation to share
teach
that
people.
with others. And so, hence, I wrote the book. Now, Monday, I'm doing a fairly major presentation in the province of Alberta to the ADHD Association there. Probably 3, 4, 500
Wow,
people. I
good.
don't know how many. But, so I still have an obligation to do that, in my opinion. And for the rest, I have the same attitude as you do. Every day to me is a good day. If I fly around, say to a lot of people, I'm a pilot, but I do a lot of business in the United States. If I fly around and I always sit by the window, I say, it's paradise. How lucky we are. And
That's right.
so compared to a lot of other places in the world, Eastern Europe is an example, the Middle East, China, Russia, some places in South America, how lucky we are here.
That's right. I'm a stage 3 breast cancer survivor like my mother. And I've often said when you have dinner with the Grim Reaper and you don't go home with the guy, it changes you. Because when you're faced with the fact that you may not have the opportunity to grow old, it changes you
Yeah,
and it kind of flips your life. And I kind of hope that not everybody doesn't wait until they're at that moment to change their life because nothing is guaranteed. Nothing.
no,
But forgiving your past, the thing about forgiveness is nobody wants to do it. They just don't want to do it. And the reason they don't want to do it is because they're thinking of that unforgivable person. But if you start with the easy ones and you work your way up the list, well, now it's going to be easier. It's going to be so much easier. I'll give you a visual. You're going to like this. If you're listening to this broadcast, I'm about to hold a coffee cup in front of my face. I'm holding a purple coffee cup. And when you first get angry, it's easy. Look at my body language. You and I could go out to dinner. We could go take a walk. I can manage this. Come on now. This is easy because it is. But humans irritate other humans, don't we? And if we don't get stuff out of the cup, we're going to keep filling it up with anger and bad self-talk and bitterness. And then eventually now it's taking me 2 hands to hold up the cup. Now, I still am holding it off to the side, so I can still see opportunities and pay attention to life, but it's starting to bug me, isn't it? It's starting to creep into my conversations, and I'm still putting stuff into the cup. So if I still don't release any stuff, now I'm holding the cup in front of my face. My
exactly,
world has stopped.
exactly.
I'm sick and tired all the time because anger is toxic. I'm missing opportunities that are just passing me by. And I'm losing friends because nobody wants to talk to me. And even if I spin the stories funny, well, I'm still talking about them. And
Yeah.
so my system is designed to start with the easy ones. And as you start forgetting those easy people, well, now look at my body language. Now it's off to the side again. I still haven't even touched the unforgivable people on my list. I'm still doing the people I label 1, 2, and 3. But look what
Exactly.
it's done to my life.
Exactly.
Now I can see opportunities. I can see money making opportunities. I can see my dream relationship. I can see health. And
Exactly.
that's what my system's designed to do. And if you keep on going, eventually you can forgive a lot of the people in your life. Now look at my body language. I can look back in my past, and I have a rough past, not as rough as yours, but I can look back there and I can see the love.
Yeah.
Now I can probably remember the bad things. So can you. We can both
Yeah.
probably sit here
Sure.
and think about it and tell stories.
Yeah.
But we don't, because I remember the adults that were trying to help that kid. And I remember the love that was actually there. So have I changed my past? I've changed my perspective. And
Yeah.
that's what forgiveness has done. It's changed my perspective.
I like it, Catherine. Now, so when you started writing, writing is
Mhm.
not easy, and so
Mm.
like when I wrote my first book, Against All Odds, a lot of people had said to
Right?
me, "You should write a book about it. Yes, that's an interesting life." And so I tried to do that for about 20 years. Stop, start, and then about 6 years ago, now I'm well into my 70s. Then I knew if I didn't do it now, it would never happen. So it took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it. And so that brings me to, what was the first book that you wrote, and what did you come to the conclusion that, like in my case, I had thought about it for a long time, and then, as I already indicated, it's not easy to do, and it is very involving as you start. And so what motivated you to do it, and what is the first book that you wrote? And
The
if you
first book
have,
I wrote,
do you have a copy of it there?
probably not. It's in my bookcase. I'd have to stand up and get it.
Yeah, you can if you
It's
want
the
to.
first book I ever wrote was a book called The Concierge Manual. And in 1995, I quit my job, and my husband and I started our own business, the very first one. It was called Meeting Planning Plus. Didn't make a dime, but it was the best business we ever started because it taught me everything, and I made a bunch of mistakes. And then we started another business because we read in Entrepreneur magazine about this brand new industry called the concierge industry. Remember, those were the days of dial-up modems. Google wasn't a thing. And you could, in the time it took me to download something, I could go upstairs, make a sandwich, a pot of coffee, and come back down while the time we were waiting for stuff on the computer.
Exactly.
But we read an article about this brand new industry called the concierge industry. And what happened was, around in the early 1900s, that doesn't sound right, but at the latter part of that century, a group of hotel concierge said, if the concierge idea works in a hotel industry, I bet I can bring this to mainstream America. And they did very successfully. So in 98, when I started, if there were 20 around the world, that might have been high. And we came to the conclusion that we were doing more concierge work than meeting planning. So based on what we were doing, I created a website because we didn't have two dimes to scrape together. So I created a website, which was very rudimentary, and we launched. And very soon the phone started to ring and emails started from people all over the world saying, could you just help me figure out what to charge? Well, they're not in the same town as me. So I started spending time on the phone helping them out. And my husband came in and he asked me the $1,000,000 question. Why are you doing it for free? Really excellent question. So we started a consulting business, and quite honestly, everything just kind of dovetailed from there. People started asking me more and more questions, and I thought maybe I should write a book. And I sat down and I thought about it. Never written a book before. And I thought, if I was somebody starting out as an entrepreneur in a brand new industry, in a brand new business, what would I want to learn? And in my head, I thought everything. So that's what I did. I wrote a book about everything, from getting your business plan and your business cards straight through to customer service and everything in there. And I retired from the industry in 2020, but the last edition is the 6th edition. So I actually wrote that book about 7 times.
Yeah.
And that was the very first book I ever wrote. But the thing about writing a book, most people think you have to come up with the title. Then you have to do for chapter 1, chapter 2, but you don't. You could start with whatever you're thinking about right now. what you're writing now could end up to be chapter 20. It doesn't matter. And then at the end, you sit down at all the things you've written and you organize it and you put it into a book. So don't get, if you're thinking about writing a book, don't get overworked about what's the first thing I'm going to say. It was a dark and stormy night. Maybe you want to quote Snoopy. Okay, keep going. But you just start to write. I wrote one of my books in a chemo chair during chemotherapy. Why? I was bored.
Yeah.
And I wrote most of the book on my cell phone. So writing, just write, and don't let anybody talk you out of it.
So what I see in you, Katharine, is maybe like me. I am a storyteller. That's who I am, and that's the foundation of who I am, and so that's how I write books, and that's how I do a lot of other things. And hence obviously podcasting, which is the I call it the new media, and you're probably the same as me. I came from that time too. There were no cell phones. There were no computers. Nothing. So I sent a telegram to my parents in 1965. It took always time to get it back. Said the telegram saying, yeah, "Good, I'm working at the lumber mill now. Stop, and I'm making $2 an hour. Blah, stop, and send me some money. Blah blah blah. That kind of stuff. Now I can pick up my cell phone."
Here's what you and I have that they didn't have. We had old-fashioned telephones, and when we got mad, there's nothing more satisfying than slamming that telephone down into the cradle. You can't do that with a cell phone. You'll break the darn thing.
Exactly.
But back then, you could go boom, and it made you feel so much better.
Yeah. So then it started, blogging to a certain extent. I did that. I liked that. And then I started working with a local television organization and did interviews locally. And then COVID came. And they said, what do we do now? And I had this apartment here, downtown Prince George, just as an investment. And said, well, let's make it a studio. And so that's what we did. And then the next thing is that we have lots of interesting people in the region, but then we started to join Podmatch, and now we are podcasting globally, and as you are my podcast, I'm hosting is 381, where I'm hosting. I do probably another 200 or so where I'm a guest, and it is amazing, and we're approaching 750,000 subscribers on YouTube. It's an amazing. There we are sitting here, having a conversation. Are you in New York now, or?
I'm in North Carolina.
You said that. You're in North Carolina. I'm in Central British Columbia, and it feels like we have developed this relationship. It feels like you're sitting right with me. And we've developed this, knowing each other in this friendship that we have developed in a lot of areas where we have similarities. And so, and at the same time, Katharine, as you know and as I know, is that globally we got at least a couple of million people will watch us in our conversation. It is fantastic. Amazing. So that then being said, let's make sure we have your website and you have books. The books you've written about 10 or 15 of them, I believe.
I have.
And are they all on Amazon, or
all my books are on Amazon. I have a book on my cancer journey called Rainbows and Banana Peels. I have a book that teaches people how to tap into their intuition called The Little Bird in Your Shoulder. Okay. And I have my latest book, which is the first book of 3. The second book in this series is going to be How to Forgive Yourself. Hello. But the first book is called The Ultimate Path to Forgiveness, Unlocking Your Power. I have the audiobook available as well. And all the information can be found on my website at katharinegiovanni.com.
And do you do audios on them as well?
Most of my books have audio books. My younger son and I have done the audio books, and I think we've done 2 of them, and we're still talking to each other, which is banner.
Yeah.
Audiobooks are not as easy as people think.
No, like
So I'm
I'm
working on getting the
ADHD
rest.
and dyslexia. So for me, I do audios of all my books, but it takes
Yeah.
me longer than it does somebody else. But I think it's important to do them because
Yep. I
you're a
agree.
very, very good speaker and very, good uh, communicator. And that's another one that I'm doing. I'm a book on communications. So we're just at the end here of our show, so I just want to give you room for your next one. Is that for all the people watching us from around the world? The both for Katharine Giovanni and myself, John Brink, subscribe to our podcast and then share it with others. Like it if you like it. It stimulates us to do more of these podcasts and comment on it if you can and if you will. Katharine, it was a privilege, and let's stay in touch.
I would love that. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a joy. You're a joy. Keep doing what you're doing. You're kind of like a lighthouse for people. So keep shining your light.
Thanks, Katharine. Take care.
My pleasure.
Bye bye.